Good evening, everyone, and hello, and thank you for being here. It's lovely to see everybody. I'm not sure that the Dharma talk I'm going to give is a Buddhist Dharma talk, but I'm hoping so. It is about interdependence and interpermeation and that kind of thing, so maybe it qualifies. As you may have seen in the email, the talk is inspired by this book by David Hinton, Wild Mind, Wild Earth. Subtitle, Our Place in the Sixth Extinction. And David Hinton, in case you haven't heard of him, is a poet, an essayist, a translator of ancient Chinese poetry, a very fine and prolific translator of ancient Chinese poetry. He's a Chan practitioner with considerable depth, I would say, and a philosopher. And he also wrote a book called China Roots, which is very interesting because in that book, he traces the roots of Chan back to Taoism. Taoism was along with Confucianism, the main religion in China when Buddhism went to China from India. And so, as often happens, Buddhism took on a more than a Taoist tint. There's a very heavy Taoist influence on Buddhist practice in China, especially in Chan. So that's who David Hinton is. This book came out in 2022. And I had remembered the first line of the book. I read it while I was on retreat. And then I remembered the first line of the book as, "We are in love with our world." But it turns out that I was wrong. And the first sentence is actually, "Before intention and choice, before ideas and understanding, and everything we think we know about ourselves, we love this world around us." I think that either way, I would ask the same question, which is, really? Are we really in love with this world? And if so, why are we treating it the way we are? And why and how is he saying this? And I want to emphasize the sentences it actually is: before intention and choice, before ideas and understanding, before everything we think we know about ourselves, before all those things, we're in love with this world. So I'm going to read you a little bit from the book. After that first sentence, he says, "How can that be?" He asked the same question I did. "How can we love all this when our cultural assumptions tell us in so many ways that we humans are fundamentally other than nature, and that nature's only real value is how it supports our well-being? There's no love in that. Doesn't love require kindred natures? And what is kinship with wild earth but wild mind?" I don't know if love requires kindred natures or not. And I'm happy to sort of hold that thought in abeyance. And maybe it depends on what he means by kindred. But for me, the jury's kind of out on that one. He also says wild mind and wild earth. And what are those? And again, I don't know that I want to try to say. Wild could mean a lot of things. And one of the things it means to me is not tamed by humans, not under human control. But he's saying this about human minds. Human minds are wild and not under our control. And maybe those of us who meditate can see how that would be so. And maybe he's pointing to the mind before conceptualization. Or maybe he's pointing to the mind that's wildly free and creative. Or something else. Savage? I don't know. But in any case, it's an interesting choice of words to me. I'm going to read you a little bit more. He goes on to say, how else could we feel exhilarating awe when a majestic orca whale leaps joyfully? Yes, forget anthropomorphism because they are so like us, so kindred. Leaps joyfully out of the water, twisting spectacularly as it crashes back down. Or feel grief that southern resident orcas of the northwest coast are slowly starving to death. Anger and guilt that it's because of us. The noise of industrial ship traffic disrupting the echolocation they need to locate prey. Polluted seawater. Chinook salmon, their traditional prey, decimated by dammed rivers and overfishing and environmental toxins. We love this world, this living planet. We feel joy when life thrives, grief when it suffers and dies. This may seem obvious and uninteresting in and of itself, but it's a mystery, isn't it? Because given our Western assumptions, it's inexplicable. And he's going to say a bit about our Western assumptions. Ancient Greek philosophy conjured a transcendental realm of pure idea that seemed more real and true than the empirical world around us, because pure idea is changeless and therefore reliable, while wild earth is constantly changing and therefore unreliable. This transcendental realm was associated with an immortal soul, establishing a dualism that opens a fundamental rupture between mind and earth. That dualism set the course of Western consciousness, especially as combined with Christian theology, continuing today as an unnoticed cultural assumption that defines the very structure of our everyday experience. And it's quite the opposite of kinship, for it tells us that we are not wild, not earth. It tells us instead that we are the noble human in strict opposition to the fundamentally other and lesser nature. And if you can bear with me, I am going to read one more paragraph. And this paragraph is written by Robinson Jeffers. Robinson Jeffers, for those of you who may not have heard of him, was an American poet writing in the 19th century, 20th century, early 20th century. I'm sorry, I'm not quite remembering that. An American poet wrote about the central California coast where he lived. He lived on a cliff above the sea. And he was also an icon of the environmentalist movement. So he wrote, in his critique of the West's human-centered perspective, he wrote a radical philosophical vision. That's what Hinton says. Here's what Jeffers says. I believe that the universe is one being. All its parts are different expressions of the same energy, and they are all in communication with each other, influencing each other, therefore parts of one organic whole. This is physics, I believe, as well as religion. The parts change and pass or die, people and races and rocks and stars. None of them seems to me important in itself, but only the whole. This whole is in all its parts so beautiful, and is felt by me to be so intensely in earnest that I am compelled to love it and to think of it as divine. It seems to me that this whole alone is worthy of the deeper sort of love, and that here is peace and freedom. I might say a kind of salvation, In turning, in turning one's affection outward toward this one God, rather than inward on oneself or on humanity or on human imagination and abstractions. It's really kind of radical. And this is all not completely foreign to us. We've talked about things like this. And thank you for your patience while I read quite a bit there, and listening to reading isn't always fun. In any case, I'm deeply sympathetic. And this is in line with Hinton's investigations into the Taoist roots of Chan or Zen, because in Taoism, there is something which Hinton translates as existence tissue, which is a massively generative source, if you will, from which all things come and to which all things return. You might think, for those of you who have a Kechimiyaku, an ancestral line, those of you who've received the precepts, at the top of the Kechimiyaku graph, there's a circle which represents the source from which all things flow. And from that source, there's a red line that goes down through the Buddha and all the ancestors and down to us. And then it returns, that red line, which is the blood of the Buddhas, returns to that circle at the top. It returns to the source. All things come from and return to this one source. The extent to which we are of each other and all things is sobering and awesome. And any sense that we are separate from nature, or better than nature, that our minds are not wild, that the so-called world exists for our needs and wants for us to exploit, even if we destroy it, becomes completely untenable. And so does any sense we might have of being separate from it. As I so often say, we are not separate. If we are not separate, then we must care for it. We must care for it. It becomes an ethical obligation. If we are permeated by all things, then we must love them. And I didn't say like them, but we must love them. We're not separate because we're interdependent with all things. But if I say, I am interdependent with all things, the I is unnecessary or extra, or shifts our focus in a direction that might not be helpful, because all things then become our instruments, something for us to use. As long as we see the I as necessary, then we aren't really understanding what Hinton is trying to say, or knowing it in the depths of our being, and we're not really understanding our non-separation. As Jeffers says, the human is irrelevant. I'm irrelevant or not important. Actually, nothing's important. You know, Reverend Master Jiu, I'm reminded of, she said, nothing matters, but she also said everything matters, but it's everything, not some things matter. Nothing's important. There is just coming and going, changing, appearing and disappearing. From this perspective, what is the problem with death or with aging and disease? Why are we afraid of them? Why do we think they shouldn't come to us? If we could drop the I, could we be peace? To me, the implications of all this are incredible, because to me, this means that military action of any sort, political solutions, massive wealth held in a few hands, unregulated free market capitalism all become untenable because all involve opposition and harm to others, not caring for each other. And I hope you will forgive me my forays into things we sort of try not to talk about when we're together. I wonder even if competitive games are a good idea. Are they really fun? Now, I know that maybe all of you enjoy competitive games, but maybe they're fun for the winner. I'm not sure if I can any longer partake because of the kind of opposition that gets set up in a competitive game. And do we want to encourage that way of thinking and being in our lives? And everything that we do creates a groove in our brain. And the more we repeat it, the deeper that groove gets. And yet, to live in this world, it's impossible for us to not be involved in these things. We can't put money in a bank without supporting the military, etc. Systems are in place, and we can't survive without working within those systems. And this places us, to my mind, in a very difficult dilemma, and in fact, a soul-destroying dilemma. In the end, I have to confess, this is what drove me into becoming a monk. Near the end of his book, Hinton makes a claim that really shook me because, and periodically throughout this book, he will do something that really cuts at our, maybe cuts at is too strong a word, but challenges very primary assumptions we make. But at the end of the book, he really does it. He says that even the mess we've gotten ourselves in right now, and he's addressing climate change in particular, but the whole mess, the Sixth Extinction, and all the rest of the full catastrophe are natural. They have to be because we are inextricably nature ourselves. So all that we're doing isn't some artificial thing that human beings set up. It's actually part of what nature is. The Greco-Christian assumptions are, and I'm quoting, the ecosystem itself within the, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I'm reading this correctly, so that I'm conveying the meaning. He's saying that the Greco-Christian assumptions are the ecosystem itself inside of us, as us. And he goes on to say, it's breathtaking how we are at every level woven into the world. Far from our operating assumption that we are an inside directed at a world out there, everything about us is always already that out there itself. How boundless it feels. The very structures of mind, its every dimension, boundless with the intricate distances of wild earth. So to me, this means that human depredation, and to Hinton is making this claim, human depredation is no different from the causes of past mass extinctions like volcanoes and floods, which is kind of mind-boggling because we think we've caused this, and that's different from a volcano causing an extinction. We ourselves exist because of past mass extinctions. And this is the way of our world, appearing here, disappearing there, as I said earlier, flourishing and vanishing. This mass extinction, the one that appears to be before us, will open new possibilities, perhaps more varied and beautiful than the world we know. Maybe more varied and beautiful than anything we can imagine. Hinton says, and I quote, "Perhaps the Sixth Extinction's most radical and profound teaching is that the Sixth Extinction is perfectly fine." Now, that's a mind bender for me, but I want to say that I would never suggest, and Hinton would never suggest, that we shouldn't do anything about climate change. Oh, well, it's natural, so, we're doomed. That's the end of it. He's not saying that at all. But perhaps what he is asking us to do is to remind ourselves one more time that this world is infinitely impermanent. The ground beneath our feet is literally constantly changing and moving. And we don't know. It's a call to don't know mind. What we face is sad, and it is also beautiful. Hinton says, wandering boundless and free through the selfless unfolding of things. Wandering boundless and free through the selfless unfolding of things. This is liberation. This is kinship with our world and love of our world. And therefore, we must not harm our world. And that's what I have to say tonight. And I hope it made a little sense. And I'm happy to hear what all you have to say in a moment.